We are going to be discussing MCOs, multi-club ownership, and while this panel is called the new venture of football's future, I think it's not so new, and I don't think it's the future. I think it's the now. On stage with me is Michael, Marc, and Jasper, three key players in this MCO structure that we're seeing really take over football as we know it. Michael, we'll begin with you. Give us a brief introduction, who you are, and what your piece of the MCO puzzle is. Welcome.
Oh, God, yeah, Michael, Sports Investment Partner, has been investing in the sports industry for, 15 years. My role in the MCO world is I'm a part of Mercury 13 as an advisor. We're one of the first women's MCOs that are out there, and there are several, and we can get into how we see the world. And I've also helped various men's MCOs as they built out clubs, find them the right assets and so on. So happy to dig in.
We are gonna dig in on which clubs your group has invested in, why you've made those decisions. Marc, we're gonna come to you in a minute because you're the numbers guy on the stage. Jasper, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. My name's Jasper Yildirim. As it showed, I'm the executive director of Amissos and the chief investment officer of my family industrial and logistic group. We are a relatively new MCO, about 3 years running, and that stemmed after we acquired majority stake in second division USL Dunkirk in France's second division. Prior to that, about 8 years ago, my family made an investment in a Turkish team on the Black Sea by the name of Samsunspor. At the time, they were a third division club, and over the course of 5 years, we were able to bring them up to the first division, the Super League, and we had the great fortune of playing our first Conference League game a couple weeks ago. And we're very excited because it's the first time in the club history in which they're playing in such a competition that requires qualification in European competition.
Not only playing, but winning. So congratulations on that win. Marc, welcome in. You are from Gemini Sports, so you're on the number side, the data side. You're providing these two with the numbers that they need to make the correct decisions.
Yeah, that's it. So thanks for having me. Hello, everyone. I'm Marc. I lead the engineering team at Gemini Sports. And I would not say I'm a key player, but I've been a very privileged observer of the process of the last years. So as you said, we're trying to give technology and data-driven tools for clubs and organizations. So I would love to get more insights on how this MCO, on this creation of networks, is actually helping the adoption of technologies and data in clubs.
Okay, so now that you know the players on the stage, let's dive in. Michael, you are a member of Mercury 13, an advisor, and you guys are working with two women's teams. First was FC Como, and then you just most recently acquired Bristol City Women, which was really a monumental move, one that really is going to change the way that MCOs operate in the women's space. Walk us through those two decisions.
Well, look, I think, first of all, I mean, it's hard to turn down a brand like Como, right? From a personal perspective, great excuse to take the wife out there. But, I think being in the big leagues is what we want to be. Como's in Serie A, so, and it's an independent club, so we can maintain that. If you're not playing in the UK and you're in women's football, I think you're making a drastic mistake. So then it was about finding the right fit for us. I think there's many things that people don't know about the city of Bristol. So there are two cities that are GDP positive to the UK, and that's London and Bristol. So when you're looking for what's the growth market, it's young, lots of universities, so you've got this talent base there. Great facilities, Stephen Lansdowne, who's owned Bristol City, Ashton Gate, has done an amazing job. So you're able to come in, and obviously we're majority control. They're still involved, but again, when you're looking at the landscape of the UK, in our view, you're not going to buy a Chelsea or a Liverpool. Although obviously there are conversations out there in the media about different clubs looking to sell stakes. So where can we have control? What's effectively independent, but a great city. And we hope to have more news in the not too distant future about how we continue to build this out.
What is the end goal with a team like Bristol City Women? What is the aim in acquiring a team like that?
Well, the first one is at some point promotion. I think we've got plenty of work to do, and with anyone who's been in a second division or trying to get promotion, it's complicated, it's difficult. Sometimes the luck of the ball gets in the way. That's got to be goal number one. But I think for me, I'm trying to look at it as an advisor and investor that from a macro level, women's football in the UK is just on this amazing trajectory. And it's been also, as a Chelsea fan, to watch this happening, I think that's just awe-inspiring to see. I think there's no end to the growth we can see, both commercially and playing-wise, technical skills and so on. But we're a startup, right? So we have to come into it with a very different lens to the way Jasper's looking at it from a men's organization. We're a startup with 2 startup clubs in startup leagues. And that, you have to be pretty pragmatic about life in that kind of scenario.
Jasper, your tie to Samson Sport was a familiar tie. It was one that was deeply rooted in your family's roots. Walk us through that decision and how it was a no-brainer to take over and take them to the Conference League.
Yeah, it's a great point. Actually, when it came to Samson Sport, when it came to football, I didn't anticipate my family getting involved in the sport itself. But a club which was very notable was going through a very difficult and challenging time. And once we decided that we had financially backed them, so we transitioned from being a sponsor to, and it's a unique case in Turkey, and I'm sure a lot of clubs throughout Europe, they're owned by associations or foundations. Well, Samson Sport was as well. But to ensure stability, they ended up converting it into a company in which we ended up buying the company, including its debt, and rolled it over. Our philosophy in the corporate side is an investor-operator mindset, and it was similar to what we implemented in Samson Sport. There's familiarity with the region, the cities where my father grew up, and over the course of seeing and experiencing the 3rd division and transcending 2 divisions up to the 1st division, we got to experience a lot. And we noticed sort of the obstacles, the shortfalls, and that is what engaged us in looking at an MCO structure. So we didn't invest or look to acquire a majority stake in our second club just for the sheer fact to add an additional club to our portfolio. It was actually to serve a purpose. I don't tend and don't care to say that Samson Sport is our flagship club, and I say that as a representative of Dunkirk, but in the MCO, it is. However, it's clear that both clubs have such an independent strategy in which both of them are sustainable on their own. However, we look to unlock those synergies amongst the two. And within the MCO, I think it's important to note, we try to decouple our academy in Samsun from the actual A team, because in the region of Turkey, there's not too many academies, especially those with beds. And so decoupling that, we're able to strategize independently, and partially that strategy of what are we going to do with those players. Since one of our main, let's say, goals is both develop young Turkish talent and see them prosper on the international stage, as well as potentially come to Samsunspor, but also try to, let's say, have the best sporting success for the club itself. Looking at lower leagues such as Dunkirk allowed us to find possibilities of, let's say, enhancing our abilities to structure player pathways beyond just the academy and the A team, which is a first division team, where now we have a second club and may potentially even look to go what I would consider even more upstream to the source and look at other regions such as Latin America, the Africas, or even just a smaller group to sort of enhance sort of our structure.
You talk about the player pipeline, and that's a huge piece of the MCO structure. We're going to dive into that in a moment. But Marc, both Michael and Jasper are highlighting their MCO's profile, the clubs that they've acquired, the decision-making that goes into either of them. How does Gemini play a role in this? How do you guys get the data together? Who is asking for the data? What data is valued and weighed? Give us kind of insight into the numbers.
So, first of all, we touched on very interesting points. I would love to go back to those. But to your question, at Gemini, what we're trying is always trust the decision-making that the club is taking in place. So we usually allow them the decision in terms of which data sources to pick them up. We can advise on that, but generally they have their own long-term contracts and relationships already going on. What we do play a key role, I would say, is on helping them not only, first of all, take on this informed decision on which type of relationships to build on these MCO networks, but also focus on what Jasper mentioned right now, like the lower leagues, some emerging markets as well. So we try to put all of that together to get like a, I would say, objective decision. It's not at all making the decision. At the end, the investors, the owners, are the ones that they push the button, I would say. But yeah, we try to give them all the tools possible for that.
Jasper, jumping back to the player pipelines, how are you guys streamlining those pipelines? How are you connecting the two clubs while still maintaining their individual identities?
No, it's a good point. And I'll say whenever it comes to expanding as an organization inorganically through, let's say, acquiring another club or entity and putting them within a portfolio, it's one thing to make the acquisition. That's easy. Implementing the strategy is a challenging part. We have identified various synergies that we are hoping to unlock. And when it comes to players, one, we already have an academy which is producing young talent. We have connections, even our partner in Dunkirk. He's a football player by the name of Dembaba. Many of you may have heard or know of him. He himself has an academy in Senegal. So there are discussions, and my background is corporate finance. I'm big on financials, but I try to keep that
So you're a
at the
numbers
door.
guy like Marc.
Yeah, to a degree, I'm a numbers guy, and I'm all about sustainability. Where even having engagement with more senior teams or other teams for loans to balance the books, so not everything is, let's say, owned by us, that's important. Because we also want to develop talent within our own structure, but we're willing to also be, let's say, a talent development club at Dunkirk, that is, for bigger clubs to come and leverage us and bring their talent. We want to ensure that whichever player comes to us, just like me as Amissos, I'm a steward of the club, being a part of its current management. Our technical guys, our sportive team, they are stewards of these players at that point in time in their career. So we want to provide them the tools, enhance them, hopefully try and unlock a potential of coming and going to Samsunspor, but we don't fixate on that. We know there's different avenues for all players.
Michael,
Sorry, I was going to say,
go ahead.
I mean, I think it's really important that anyone who goes into an MCO and builds one needs to really understand what their why is and why they're trying to build it. And from there, they can start figuring out, as you said, the acquisition of the clubs is simple. What you actually then do with it and how you do with it. And I think for me, some of the bits that I've wanted to push back against, and thankfully, I'm doing it in the women's game, which is different, and it is a different ethos to it. But in the men's game, I've seen parties look at, say, Man City, Red Bull, and go, well, we should be doing that because look at the valuation that they received or whatever it is. And you go, guys, you're playing a different game, right? Jasper sounds like he knows the game he's in and how he wants to do it. And then, okay, he's got to bring the teams, the coaches, the fans along with him. But if you try to replicate what Man City is doing and you don't actually understand, yeah, they have 13 clubs in an MCO, but theirs is a game of statehood. They're going into countries where they're trying to do trade deals. They are playing a different game. You cannot beat them at that game. Because it doesn't matter if they lose money at a club level. They don't want to, but they're playing different games. So Red Bull, it's selling cans of drink. They want to make profit from player trading, but they're selling cans of drink. So you really have to understand what you're in it for to, I think, make sense out of it.
You spoke about how different the ethos is between the women and the men's game. In player pipelines, it's also very different in the women's game. So walk us through the differences that you've experienced.
If I think of the women's game, I would kind of equate it right now to, say, MLS when it was launching post-94 World Cup, right? And if you think of the MLS then, it effectively had one or two owners that owned all the teams. And over time, having invested in the league and built the league out, more clubs emerged, they built the right infrastructure, And I think you can see a lot of parallels between, well, we need to have the right infrastructure. We need backers who understand the long-term play in women's football. This is not I'm going to buy a club, promote it 2 levels, and flip it, right? That is not what the women. So personally, and again, I like competition on and off the pitch. I'm delighted to see the likes of Monarch, Michelle Kang, Beck Smith, who's here today, doing the same thing, because it needs real effort to take this startup, invest across multiple leagues, multiple clubs, and bring the whole standard up. And I think at the end of the day, again, I'm an investor and a numbers guy. At the end of the day, I want to make money out of this. Just, it's going to take longer in my mind on the women's game.
To that point, I think the fan resistance to MCOs ties in directly with that, where they feel that sometimes these acquisitions are not coming from a place of protecting the club, protecting the club's identity, keeping the integrity of who the club and its fans are. It's just a money game. How do you combat that? Feel free to jump in.
I just wanted to jump in on what Michael said, that what we've seen is that the model where these MCO builders they keep a long-term goal that they know how to achieve. This is so important, but you can also flip the situation, and then you need to be respectful on each of the clubs that are on the network. And there's a lot of attention that it needs to be onto the communities, the integrity, not only the independence, which is maybe more related to the regulations that are going on right now, but I would say one of the key components to achieve that is that you need to give space for every club. Every club has its own differences. The synergies are the biggest opportunity on these networks, but you have to take care of each of the parts. Because if not, there's already some examples where these acquisitions have not been properly accepted by the fans and the community.
I think it ties into what Michael said. It's what is it that the MCO is trying to solve? When we looked to target Dunkirk as a potential target, we didn't want a large commercial brand. I'll be very open. I didn't want a big fan base. Yes, there may be upside to commercialize some merchandise, have more fans there, but we wanted to train players. So our baseline was strong facilities, quality of competition, and then I think it actually worked in our advantage having the smaller size that we were able to have, when looking at Dunkirk, they had trouble financially speaking. So if we can fill that problem, that issue their fans were facing, that the city was facing, which was providing financial sustainability, it may help them get on board with what we wanted to achieve there. And now it's like a cohesive goal. And they're happy. We're going into our third season in the second division, and this is one of the longest periods in modern day in which they have been within the second division. Prior to joining, we actually went back to the drawing board. So we were looking at first division Portuguese teams because the homegrown and non-EU player ruling was very flexible. We looked at France and their connectivity to different markets for bringing in new players, as well as them being able to be a good market for players to excel there and be either, let's say, sold or sent to better clubs. And we revised our strategy from a second division larger team to a third division team because we felt that step by step we can probably look for promotion if we are to enhance the allocation to the club. Fortunately, during the negotiations, they achieved it on their own. And that's where you mentioned...
didn't pay the premium though, did you?
Pardon me?
I hope you didn't pay the premium for the promotion.
I'm not going to disclose that, but we didn't. So it was better for us. But I say that because we didn't want to bite off more than we could chew. We knew step by step. And one of the most difficult things I would say is sometimes the opacity of what next season's financials may look like in football. You bring up a startup nature of women's football. Well, promotions can also have that nature where you're going to have to reassess your budget. How much should we allocate? Is this going to work? We went into Dunkirk the very same year in which our flagship team got promoted to the Super League. So now you have two budgets that are going to require more resources. How are you able to deliver such? So these are things I think as anyone who's looking to go into an MCO, you really got to understand where you are today, what are you wanting for your next club, and what are you looking at where you're going in 5 years, and does the club need that, or do you have to invest in it for it to achieve where you want to see it? Because if you can't see a few years down the road, you're going to be battling each and every year, and that's going to be difficult.
Not only difficult for you, for the MCO, but you're going to be met with resistance by the fans who aren't feeling that stability, who aren't seeing the growth. Michael, what was your experience like, both with FC Como Women and also with Bristol? Did you feel the resistance? Were you met with overwhelming welcome? How was it?
We don't have the same legacy issues that men's sport does. And they aren't the big powerhouse brands that, you're going to have that same kind of pushback. And Como is definitely building something. I mean, Bristol, I think we've acquired it. We're going through league permissions right now. Everything should go above board and be ticked. But, again, I think we're coming at it very mindful of, Bristol is a very proud town. It's got lots of rivalries just from the men's side as well. So you have to be very mindful of what does this fan base want, what are they looking for. You haven't seen, I think, in the women's game much within MCOs, lots of player trading yet. It just hasn't emerged. Again, the MCOs are literally happening as we're speaking. So, again, I think we're going to see in 3 or 4 years. But again, it's so early on in its life cycle that I think we get to help shape that story. And I think my personal take is that generically speaking, we're being welcomed in because people see us investing in women's sport and the women's product and that we believe in it, we're here for the long term. So I think that buys us enormous goodwill. I think when you come into a men's football club that, particularly if it's a bigger brand, that has a long tradition, and they're saying, well, even if they've always been a trading club, suddenly that you're defining us as a trading club. What do you mean you're defining? No, we don't think of ourselves that way, even though that has been their existence. So that's a far more complicated scenario to walk into.
And it's a scenario that a lot of MCOs find themselves with. You kind of alluded to it in saying that Samson Sport was the main club, even though you shouldn't say that because you are also representing your Ligue 2 side. How do you manage that when in reality you do have a club that is perhaps playing on a different level than your others?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I would say I'm an internal warrior for Dunkirk and others, and I think when you have ownership internally to take that, not just a fiscal, but performance responsibility on an individual basis, you are able to at least provide that notion that that club is an entity of its own. It has its own aspirations, its own goals, and there's going to be someone to fight for it. But of course, making sure that when there's opportunities for that symbiotic relationship or for a win-win scenario to occur, it can go through with it.
So we're talking about some of the cons when it comes to MCOs, and one of the big elephants in the room that we haven't discussed is how this is dealt with ethically when it comes to the sporting side by UEFA, by FIFA. When you have multiple teams that are part of the same MCO competing in the same competition. Marc, we spoke about this, and you said, I'm not an expert on this, but you are in the know. So we'll get into this conversation with your take on the issue, and then Michael and Jasper can jump in as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it goes head to head with the talent pipelines that we can see now on the current MCOs. And obviously, speaking about that, it's always a little bit risky because it's just moving as we speak and it's changing. So we don't know how it's going to look like tomorrow, honestly. So what we've seen is that there is the intention between the networks to develop this sort of like talent pipeline where you can have players within some sort of same sporting methodology, but like moving from different clubs. And you cannot ignore the sporting benefit of that. Being on a multi-club ownership that allows for even more talent to be within the premises of the network, and being able to to see what we've seen with the examples of Salzburg and Leipzig or other examples. It's true that I completely agree with European regulations, at least UEFA and FIFA, on how these transfers between the same network, they need to happen. But my humble opinion would be that we should allow for the opportunities to raise, not only stop because we have a challenge. So I think that would be my take on this. I think there's way more sporting upside, benefit in terms of talent development than challenges, but I totally agree that we need to look at this.
I think there's a real dichotomy that you have, right? So you have a European market that tends to be a bastion of free market enterprise, but wanting a governance structure that restricts free market enterprise. And then you have the challenge that governance models generally, regardless of whether it's sport or outside of sport, are much slower. So, how are governments reacting to the emergence of AI? It will go beyond them before they even know what's going on. So to me, actually I think some of the governors, they've been relatively reactive in keeping up, but then you're communicating then also, the third bit is to an audience that is hugely passionate. So I completely understood the anger from Crystal Palace fans this year. I completely understood it. And it became a comms issue because it was like, well, you have to have done X by this date. And you're sat there going, well, no one knows by that date what competition they're in. Why in this day and age can't we check the accounts by a date that's closer to, everyone's now qualified, we now knows you need to put into blind trust, whatever it is. And it should, there are mechanics for it. So I think we're going through a weird adjustment period that it needs to be better governance. I don't blame them for struggling to keep up with the speed. I mean, before we came out, I was looking a couple of days ago, and it was like, there were 100 clubs in MCOs a couple of years ago. There's now in excess of 400. Like, well, that's a hell of a speed of change for any governance body to sit there and go, whoa, like, how do we make that work?
Well, one, I would say, when it comes to regulations such as playing in same European competitions, it's only a minority, as represented around 400 plus MCOs, and only not even a handful, just a couple that may be subject to such competition restrictions. So I would say for the fans, of course, they're victims to some of this, but it doesn't, I think it's blown to a certain extent out of proportion. But now with the influx and entry of a lot of betting relating to activities, I understand competition has to be much more fair and let's say enforced.
Yeah, and I think when we say blown out of proportion, Crystal Palace fans don't think it was blown out of proportion. Is probably is the fan perspective that we're talking about, because we spoke about it backstage. At the end of the day, while this is a business for MCOs, this is a passion for the fans.
And I think what Michael alluded to earlier, MCOs are still, though you said they've been around, and they have, but I think these problems they're facing today are relatively new. So we're just reaching that inflection point on what are we to do to address such circumstances, and are they going to be successful? Are they going to change? So I can see in the coming years there's going to be a lot of policy shift and debates on what could be done to avoid such a case study.
And as Michael said, we are writing the playbook. You three are writing the playbook as it unfolds. Since 2019, the number of clubs involved in MCOs has tripled. This is something that's becoming very, very hot over the course of the last half a decade. So let's look ahead to the future. Marc, we'll begin with you. How do you see the future of MCOs? How does AI play a role? How will the data evolve, the data sharing? Do you think there will become a point where they ban data sharing as part of perhaps not being part of sporting integrity?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick point that I think us as humans, and I feel like as football fans even more, we have this negative bias that just one negative case is it just keeps on our mind, and we don't see the success stories. So I believe we should also check, there's a lot of success stories with these models.
One so close to here is Girona. Girona would not have been able to qualify for the Champions League, arguably, had it not been for the MCO and being able to acquire players like Savinho. So
exactly.
Although they didn't survive very long in the Champions League, but we won't discuss that.
And then looking at the future for MCOs, I think, and in terms of the data, I would say, I don't want to play the nerd guy here, but I think that's one of the most exciting parts. I feel technology adoption is way more strong, and it benefits way more of the organization in this model, in these network models. I believe football, we saw it on the sessions this morning, like innovation in football is beautiful, I would say. I don't know if that's the good term, but I believe MCO is just bringing even more innovation into the industry. And I would say that's where the future is going to go for. There's going to be more structure, more stability, so that a lot of clubs, while keeping their identity, they're going to be able to adopt a lot of new technologies, both on and off the field, impacting so many areas. So, yeah, really good future, I would say.
Speaking of AI, quickly to you, Michael, FC Como's, they just did a release of an off-street style kit with AI models. I'm not sure if you were aware of
Not
the
even me.
fashion side of
And
the
I meant to
club.
be an AI expert. No.
How do you see the future? Technology speaking.
Well, no. Well, actually, what I'd say is I'd like to go slightly analog on it, which is I actually think there's going to have to be a lot better storytelling from clubs, not just to the fans, but to the players. Like, we want you to come into our ecosystem because this is where we're going to end up with you. This is your career journey. I mean, I remember starting a corporate life and literally being sat down with HR, and they're like, right, so we're going to start you here, and then you're going to go to this division, you got to learn this, and then you got to this is how we prepare you for the future. And I think for a lot of the best athletes, they're going to come in and go, great, so I might come into a second division club in a multi-club network, but where do you see me? Do you see me as ending up in your top tier club? Like, what's the journey? If it's not, how do you prepare me for going out? Rather than, okay, I brought you in, I train you, and I move you on. But okay, you now have 3, 4, 5, 6 clubs. Can I go from Dunkirk to a club in Croatia to Switzerland? Now I'm back in France, but a first division club. Is that my entry point now out of your system into a Premier League club? Like, how do you prepare me for life? And I think for you to get the best talent, there's going to be more than just money. There's going to be an analog conversation of, we see a career path for you. This is how we take you there. Join our network.
So you believe that this is going to become something that's so appealing to players that they will opt to enter an MCO group as opposed to clubs that aren't in one?
Well, I think, I think
Potentially.
Potentially, almost all clubs end up in some form of MCO. So I think that becomes inevitable. Then the journey becomes, okay, so which network am I in, and what can that do for me? Even if it's, again, it might not be that you all end up at Bayern Munich and Man United, but what's the journey you can take me on that gets me to what my vision is?
Jasper, would you agree? Do you see that as the future for MCOs?
I do. I'll say, when it comes to certain big clubs that aren't part of MCO families, they already have the leverage to speak with a player's representative, their intermediary, or the player themselves, and highlight, hey, if you sign with me for an extended period, we are a notable club. And if it doesn't work out, we have leverage to loan you out to others. But other clubs, certain markets, certain regions, they might not have that. But with being a part of an MCO, you do have this, let's say, negotiating power with players, with intermediaries, where you can have those dialogues of, we envision various pathways for you, and we can sit down and discuss that. If it's a representative from Samsunspor saying, hey, we may look to acquire you from Samsunspor, but you may not be to standard today, but we see promise, a loan in Dunkirk could be applicable, or vice versa, from bringing them to Dunkirk and saying we have big hopes and we'll be monitoring you as a target for Samsunspor and get you engaged as far as looking at them, maybe send you during the summertime to also practice and understand that. So there are these additional resources that you can pool when it comes to being a part of an MCO.
I think one of the side problems is if you take Chelsea, who I support, they've been a little too blunt about it. Right, which is, okay, Andre Santos, we're going to take you, we're going to put you in Strasbourg, you're going to do a couple of seasons, because we need you to be prepared for the hard European winters. We need to see you at another level, and then we'll bring you back. And it's a very clear statement of some of their best talents that they're buying from around the world. You go there first, then you come to here. Some of them make it, some of it don't. But that makes it even harder that it's so blunt and in your face to the fan base that, well, we know he's here for only 1 year because it's very clearly he's been.
And that's where some of the resistance is met with the fans, that it just feels like a merry-go-round. I think we can all agree that MCOs will continue to grow. Marc, what are some emerging markets that you think these two gentlemen on stage, the MCOs of the world, will potentially tap into in the coming years?
Oh, wow. I think they know way more than me on where to look at. From our perspective, I think there's many opportunities. I wouldn't say I don't have my mind in between lower leagues on traditional areas or actually what it's purely called an emerging market going into. There's a lot of work into Africa, for instance, and but being extremely honest, I would say that's part of what each MCO wants to become and wants to, what they want to represent. So that's my opinion.
We've been given the 3-minute warning, so I'll give each of these gentlemen a minute. If you wanted everyone in the room to walk away with one piece of information about the future of MCOs, what you want them to know about where you see this is going, what would you want it to be? Jasper, I'll put you in the hot seat first.
Oh, wow.
You get first dibs.
Yeah, no, that's right. No, I think MCOs, it provides a different pathway of, I don't even like to use the term ownership, but it provides new pathways to management of clubs. And it's very important to understand who is the investor. Sometimes details like capital structure, who is funding them, what are their expectations, are they chasing a return, are they chasing longevity, are they chasing a platform, these are ways for you as a fan or just a participant in football who want to just see what they're doing, can understand a bit more of how that club may be managed within the grand scheme of things. And I think if done properly, because to be honest, there's no general framework. People strive to be a Man City, Red Bull. Every MCO has their own individual, independent, separate, and unique strategy. But if there is true goals, achievable goals, identifiable, as well as resources to put together, I think the cumulative portfolio, what it can do is a lot more than just a sum of the pieces, and those clubs separate and independent. And that starts with how do you find that win-win strategy or that synergy to lock them in together for bettering each individual within the portfolio.
And if done right, you can end up from the 3rd division to the Conference League, like our man.
Well, we want to
here.
remain there.
Yes.
Okay,
One win at a time. Marc?
I'll be very brief, but I would say the conclusion is that the last years we've seen MCOs going from edge cases to quite mature cases, and I would say we're going to go, I'm not sure if it for a majority or like it's going to be mainstream. I would say we need to take it as an opportunity. It will spread opportunity, will raise a lot of opportunities around. We've seen a lot of good use cases already, as I mentioned. So yeah, ready for the challenge.
And don't focus on only the bad, was
Yeah,
your message
exactly.
on the stage. Michael?
Definitely focus on the positive in women's football, that it is a group of dedicated, long-term, committed capital partners who are trying to build the women's game into so it can fulfill its real potential. And I would say in 10 years, it will look probably very different.
Well, Michael, Marc, and Jasper, thank you for the time. Thank you all for listening. I hope we all leave today with a little bit more information about the future of MCOs. Thanks.
Thank you.